There is a specific kind of silence that comes just before your own body turns against you. It's not an empty silence, but a thick, heavy one, where every heartbeat is a drum and every failed breath is a roar. I was 17 when I learned that silence. And standing in the middle of it, holding the one thing that could save me, was my little sister. She didn't help. She smiled. For 19 years I carried that moment inside me like a shard of glass, convinced it was my secret to bear. I was wrong. It was a piece of evidence. And today, in a room where you swear to tell the truth, a judge made her watch it play out on a screen for everyone to see. My name is Kimberly Grant and I'm 36 years old. And I built a life on a foundation of quiet. I run a company that helps people breathe easier. The irony isn't lost on me. For most of my life, I felt like I was suffocating in plain sight. In my own home, surrounded by people who shared my last name but not my heartbeat. I never thought I'd face that feeling again. I thought I'd buried it under years of distance and work. But the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it sends you a certified letter. Before I dive deeper into this story, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share it. Your support truly helps me bring more emotional and unforgettable stories to life. I always love hearing from you, so tell me in the comments, what's a moment from your own past that you thought you'd left behind, only to have it find you again? Your words and reactions inspire me more than you can imagine. And when we finally reach the end, don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10. I read every single one and it means a lot to me. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. The envelope from the Pierce County Superior Court felt heavier than it should. It wasn't just paper and ink. It was a gravitational pull, yanking me back across state lines and decades to a place I'd worked so hard to forget. Brighton, Washington. My hands were steady as I sliced it open, a skill honed from opening thousands of business letters. But my breath hitched just a little, just enough to remind me. Laura Grant Weston versus Rebecca Clark, defamation. I didn't know a Rebecca Clark. The name meant nothing. But seeing my sister's married name, Grant Weston, printed in that formal, brutal typeface sent a cold trickle down my spine. Laura was suing someone, and the court was demanding my testimony as a witness for the defense. My eyes scanned the attached documents, a blur of legal jargon, until one paragraph, quoted from an online article, stopped my heart. Laura has been tormenting people for decades. Ask her sister what she did when the girl couldn't breathe. Ask why their family spent years making sure no one believed her. The room, my sleek, quiet Portland condo with its view of the misty Willamette River, tilted sideways. No one knew. No one. I had never told a soul about that afternoon. Not a boyfriend, not a therapist, not my closest business partner. I had packed it away in a locked box inside me, welded it shut, and thrown away the key. How could a complete stranger know the specific private horror of my 17th year? I read the paragraph again and again. The words weren't just exposing a secret. They were cracking open the foundation of my entire adult life. I had built Kimberly Grant, CEO of AeroVital, on the belief that the past was a country I had permanently emigrated from. This letter was a visa revocation. For 3 days I moved through my life like a ghost. I chaired meetings about airway resistance and valve designs, my voice calm, my points sharp. But inside I was that girl on the carpet again, my lungs sealed, my vision tunneling. The feeling of betrayal wasn't fresh. It was ancient, calcified. But this had broken it loose, and now it was grinding against my ribs. I had to know who Rebecca Clark was. A few late-night searches painted a basic picture. A freelance journalist, mid-40s, based in Tacoma. She wrote about local history, community issues. Her article about toxic inheritance in local families had been taken down after Laura's lawsuit, but caches existed. It was well-researched. Speaking of hidden wills, familial coercion. My family was not named, but the details, they were too close. The reference to me was a single devastating line in a broader story. How did she know? The only link I had to that time was a single physical artifact. A scratched DVD in a clear case with Family Moments 2007 scrawled on it in Laura's bubbly teenage handwriting. She'd gone through a camcorder phase, documenting everything with a dramatic for-reality TV narration. I'd taken it when I left, not out of sentiment, but as a kind of perverse proof to myself that it all really happened. I'd never been able to watch it. It had sat in a box of old tax files for 19 years, a digital landmine. I needed help. And I knew exactly one person who could navigate both the digital world and the fragile terrain of my history. Elaine Rivers. We weren't daily friends, but ours was the kind of bond forged in a high school furnace. When a vicious rumor campaign had tried to destroy Elaine's reputation over a stolen exam she didn't take, I was the one who stood beside her, who found the real culprit, who faced down the crowd with her. She'd said to me then, through tears of relief and fury, "I owe you for life, Kim. For life." She was now Dr. Elaine Rivers, digital forensic specialist. I called her. My voice to my own ears sounded unnervingly calm. "Elaine, it's Kim Grant. I need to call in that life debt." There was no hesitation. "Name it." When I showed up at her lab in Seattle, the DVD in a padded envelope, she didn't ask prying questions. She saw my face, the way my hands wouldn't quite stay still. She put a coffee in front of me and said, "Tell me what you need and what you're afraid of finding." So I told her. Not the whole story, but the shape of it. The lawsuit, the article, the stranger who knew my secret. And this disc, the last tangible thread to the people I'd left behind. I need to know if there's anything on here. Anything that connects to this. She nodded, her professional demeanor a comforting cloak. "Okay, we'll do a full extraction. Video files, metadata, any hidden data streams. Sometimes these old consumer discs have more on them than people realize. It's like digital archaeology." She slid the disc into a specialized drive. "Bring whatever you have. We'll dig until we find what they tried to bury." For hours I sat in her dimly lit lab, the hum of servers a low white noise. She worked in silence, her eyes flicking across lines of code and hex data. She isolated the video files first. There were dozens. Christmas mornings, backyard barbecues, tedious hours of Laura filming her own feet. Elaine created a digestible index. And then she found it. A file labeled dinner and phone. The date stamp was 2 weeks after my asthma attack. "Play," she said softly. The video filled her large monitor. It was our dining room. The camera was shaky, held by Laura. I saw myself, age 17, looking thin and tense, pushing food around my plate. Our mother, Patricia, was speaking, her voice crisp and clear on the audio. "You need to be more grateful, Kimberly. Grandma Marjorie is asking why you're so distant. You're creating a narrative." My video self mumbled something about being busy with college applications. Then Laura's voice from behind the camera, sweet as poison. "She just likes to be difficult, Mom. Remember how she faked that whole asthma thing for attention? So dramatic." I watched my younger face flush, then go pale. I watched my mouth open, but no sound came out. The betrayal wasn't just in the lie. It was in the casual, rehearsed delivery of it. This wasn't a spontaneous taunt. This was a performance for the camera, for our mother. Patricia on screen sighed. A sound of long suffering. "We don't need to relive your attention-seeking episodes, Kimberly. Laura, turn that off now." The video ended. The silence in the lab was absolute. My own breath felt loud in my ears. Elaine didn't look at me. She simply said, "There's more." The disk has a series of archived email packages. They weren't meant to be burned to this disk. It looks like a system error from an old computer backup. It grabbed everything in a temporary folder. It's a snapshot of a Yahoo email account from 2006 to 2008. Patricia's account. She opened a text file, a log of subject lines. My eyes scanned them. Re-strategy for Mom's visit. Update. Kimberly's call to Grandma intercepted. FW. Draft of letter to Aunt Carol Re. Kimberly's issues. Important. Docs for the trust. Do you want me to open them? Elaine's voice was gentle. A doctor asking if I was ready for a diagnosis. I could only nod. What we read over the next 2 hours dismantled my childhood piece by piece. It was a corporate takeover plan with me as the hostile entity to be removed. Email after email between Patricia and a teenage Laura. Coaching, planning, manipulating. The goal was unequivocal. To systematically discredit me in the eyes of Grandma Marjorie, who held the family purse strings, a modest but significant estate. Patricia's mother was soft-hearted, they wrote. She needed to see that I was unstable, ungrateful, a lost cause, so that when the time came the inheritance would flow smoothly to Patricia, and eventually to her reliable daughter Laura. Laura had birthday cards Marjorie sent me. Patricia would call Marjorie and sigh about my latest crisis. A crisis I never knew existed. They fabricated stories of rebellion, of drug use, of theft. The asthma for attention lie was a recurring theme, a cornerstone of their narrative. One email from Patricia to Laura read, "Remember, consistency is key. If we both say we saw her pretending to struggle, that's what becomes reality. Grandma won't know what to believe." I felt a numbness spread through me, a cold so deep it burned. This wasn't just cruelty. This was premeditated. This was erasure. Every moment of confusion, every strained phone call with my grandmother, every time I felt like a ghost in my own family, had been engineered. But the deepest cut came next. Elaine, her face grim, pulled up a scanned document. It was a letter, not an email. A handwritten letter, scanned and saved as an image file. The handwriting was elegant, looping, "My Grandma Marjorie's. Dearest Dorothy," it began. "I fear my daughter Patricia is orchestrating a terrible wrong against my granddaughter Kimberly. I hear the lies she tells, see the way she turns Laura into a weapon. Kimberly's spirit is being smothered in that house. I have begun to document the inconsistencies, the things Patricia lets slip. I am keeping a journal. If something happens to me, or if Kimberly is driven away for good, I am entrusting this journal to you. Give it to Kimberly only when she is ready, not sooner. Patricia will destroy the truth if she can. She must believe she has succeeded. Wait for the right moment, my old friend. Wait for the crack in their armor. Then give my granddaughter the key to her own life. With all my love, Marjorie." The letter was addressed to Dorothy Clark, Rebecca Clark's mother. The crack in their armor. Laura's defamation lawsuit. It all crashed together in my mind, the lawsuit, the article, the journal. Rebecca Clark hadn't plucked my story from thin air. Her mother, Dorothy, was the keeper of my grandmother's last testament. Laura, in her rage at Rebecca's article, had sued the one person who could unlock the evidence that would destroy her. Elaine finally looked at me. "Kim, I don't even have the words. This is a blueprint for a family conspiracy." "It's more than that," I heard myself say, my voice strangely detached. "It's a motive. And it's a way home." The numbness was receding, replaced by a clarity so sharp it was painful. For 19 years, I thought I was running from a memory of casual cruelty. I wasn't. I was running from a crime scene, and I had just found the evidence. "I have to testify," I said. Elaine reached over, her hand covering mine on the cold desk. "You won't be going in there alone." Elaine's promise echoed in the silent car as I drove back to Portland that night. You won't be going in there alone. But the weight of what I now knew was a solitary burden. The evergreen blur of I-5 South was a tunnel back to the present, but I was no longer the same person who had driven north. The girl on the carpet, the one I had pitied and tried to forget, was no longer just a victim. She was a witness, and she had evidence. The week before the testimony was a study in surreal duality. By day, I was in my element. The CEO finalizing a multi-million-dollar acquisition offer for AeroVital. We were developing a revolutionary portable ventilator, a project I'd championed with a personal fervor I'd never fully understood until now. Lawyers in sleek offices discussed equity and IP, their voices a dry, comforting hum. But at night, in the silence of my condo, I prepared for a different kind of courtroom. I read Grandma Marjorie's journal, which Dorothy Clark had sent to me in a plain, sturdy box via certified mail. Her accompanying note was brief. "Marjorie believed in your strength. So do I." The journal was a ledger of love and lies. In her precise script, my grandmother documented every suspicious event. Patricia called. Said Kimberly was suspended for fighting. Called the school. No record. Why lie? Laura found a bottle of vodka in Kimberly's closet. Label was the brand Patricia drinks. Kimberly doesn't drink. Kimberly's birthday card to me was lost in the mail. Post office confirmed delivery. Patricia looked nervous when I asked. Page after page, a quiet, relentless chronicle of the campaign against me. The final entry, dated just a month before she passed, read, "I see the light going out in Kimberly's eyes. It is the same light her grandfather had. They are stealing it. I must secure the truth for her. My legacy is not money. It is her freedom." I held that journal and felt a connection more profound than any I'd ever felt in that house. I had not been forgotten. I had been fiercely, quietly believed. The morning of the hearing, I dressed with deliberate care. Not for them but for her, for Marjorie. A tailored deep navy suit, professional, unadorned. No armor, just truth. Elaine met me outside the Pierce County Courthouse, a grim stone building that seemed to absorb the chilly Washington drizzle. She carried a secure briefcase containing the forensic report, the authenticated video file, and the digital copies of the emails. The original journal was with the defense attorney. We didn't speak much. She simply squeezed my shoulder, a silent transfer of resolve. Walking into that courtroom was like stepping into a memory that had been waiting for me. The air was cool, smelling of old wood and lemon polish. And there they were. My mother, Patricia, sat in the front row of the gallery. She was a vision of polished control. A cream-colored sheath dress, a single strand of pearls, her silver hair in a flawless bob. Her face was a mask of concerned dignity, but her eyes, when they flicked to me, were like chips of flint. My father, Richard, sat beside her, looking smaller than I remembered. His gaze fixed on his own shoes, already absent. He had always been a spectator. At the plaintiff's table sat Laura Grant Weston. She had the expensive, cultivated look of someone who worked very hard to appear effortless. A soft blonde blowout, a sleek designer dress. She was whispering intently to her lawyer, a man with a sharp suit and a sharper smile. She looked confident, aggrieved, the picture of a woman wronged by vicious gossip. Then she saw me. Her whisper died. For a fraction of a second her mask slipped, and I saw pure, unadulterated shock, followed by a flash of the old cold calculation. It was the same look she'd had holding my inhaler. "What are you doing here?" Her expression screamed. Then the mask snapped back tighter, a little harder. She offered a thin, dismissive smile and turned back to her lawyer. The message was clear. "You don't matter. You never did." Rebecca Clark, the defendant, was a woman with intelligent, tired eyes and a stack of notepads. She nodded to me, a gesture of solidarity. Her lawyer, a calm woman named Susan Gray, gave me a steadying look. Then the bailiff spoke. "All rise." Judge Eleanor Vance entered. She was a woman in her 60s with a stern, thoughtful face and eyes that missed nothing. The room settled. The air thickened. This was no longer my memory or my family's secret. This was the law. The proceedings began with legal formalities. Laura's lawyer, Mr. Dalton, painted a picture of a vicious, unfounded character assassination. His client, a devoted daughter and sister, a pillar of her community, her reputation shattered by a hit piece from an activist blogger. He spoke of the pain, the humiliation, the damage to her standing. He made it sound so noble. Then it was Susan Gray's turn. Her voice was measured, clear. "Your Honor, the defense's case rests not on malice but on truth. The plaintiff has built her life and her case on a foundation of familial deception. Today we will not only defend Rebecca Clark's right to report that truth, but we will also give voice to a victim of that deception who has been silent for nearly 20 years. She turned. "The defense calls Kimberly Grant to the stand." My name echoed in the hushed room. The walk to the witness stand felt endless. I could feel 4 sets of eyes burning into me. Patricia's icy stare, Laura's furious glare, my father's bewildered glance, and Rebecca Clark's grateful gaze. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. The wood of the chair was smooth and cold. Susan began gently, establishing who I was. My name, my age, my relation to the plaintiff. Then she asked the question that opened the door to the past. "Ms. Grant, would you describe your relationship with your sister Laura during your late teenage years?" I looked directly at Laura. It was adversarial, but I didn't understand why until recently. I thought it was just sibling rivalry. "Can you give the court an example of this adversarial relationship?" I took a breath. This was it. The first crack. When I was 17, I suffered a severe asthma attack at home. I didn't have my primary inhaler on me. My spare was in my backpack across the living room. During that attack, while I was struggling to breathe, my sister Laura found my primary inhaler. She held it. She watched me. And she did not help. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Laura's face was rigid. "What did she do?" Susan asked, her voice soft. She smiled. And she told me to gasp harder, to see how long I would last. The murmur grew louder. Judge Vance tapped her gavel lightly. "Order." And where were your parents during this? My mother was in the room. She glanced up, but she did not intervene. My father was watching television. I crawled to my backpack and used my spare inhaler. I saved my own life. Susan let that hang in the air for a long moment. The horrific normalcy of it. Ms. Grant, did you ever speak of this incident to anyone outside your family? No. Never. So you were surprised when you read Rebecca Clark's article, which referenced this event? I was more than surprised. I was shocked. I had never told anyone. Your Honor, Susan said, turning to the judge. At this time, I would like to introduce a series of exhibits that will illuminate the context of this event and the systematic campaign of disinformation that surrounded Ms. Grant's childhood. Mr. Dalton was on his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance and scope. This is a defamation case, not a family therapy session. The witness's childhood grievances are not pertinent to whether my client was defamed. Judge Vance steepled her fingers. The article in question specifically references familial behavior and a cover-up. The witness's personal experience is directly relevant to the truth or falsity of that statement. I'll allow it. Proceed, Ms. Gray. Susan nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. I mark this as Defense Exhibit A. A forensic data report and extracted archives from a digital storage disk. Elaine, sitting behind Susan, gave an almost imperceptible nod. Ms. Grant, can you identify the source of this data? It is from a DVD labeled Family Moments 2007, recorded by my sister Laura. It was in my possession. And does this data contain only home videos? No. The forensic analysis shows it also contains accidentally archived email correspondence from my mother's email account, dating from 2006 to 2008. Another, sharper murmur. Patricia in the front row had gone perfectly still. The polished cream of her dress seemed to drain of color against her suddenly pale skin. Susan approached the bench with a tablet. With the court's permission, I will display selected excerpts. What followed was a methodical dismantling. Susan read aloud email subject lines, then the emails themselves. The cold, clinical language of exclusion. We need to reinforce the narrative of instability before Mom's visit. Laura, intercept any mail from Grandma to Kimberly. Mark it return to sender. Good work on the asthma story. Grandma is starting to believe she's prone to hysterics. With each email, the air was punched out of the room. Laura's confident posture had crumpled. She was now hunched over the table, staring at its polished surface. Patricia's mask had finally shattered. Her hand was clamped over her mouth, her eyes wide with a kind of horrified recognition. She was seeing her own words, her own strategy projected into this public, unforgiving space. This was the truth she had buried, now exhumed and displayed under fluorescent lights. Mr. Dalton objected repeatedly, but his objections grew weaker, more desperate. The evidence was authentic, it was material, and it was devastating. Then Susan said, Your Honor, I now submit Defense Exhibit B. A video file extracted from the same disk. The screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life. There we were. The shaky camera, the dining room, my teenage self. The audio was crystal clear. She just likes to be difficult, Mom. Remember how she faked that whole asthma thing for attention? So dramatic. I watched myself on screen, my face crumbling. But in the courtroom, I did not crumble. I sat straight and I watched them. I watched Laura flinch as her own youthful, vicious voice filled the room. I watched my mother close her eyes, as if she could wish it away. I saw my father, for the first time, look up at the screen, his brow furrowed in confusion, as if he was finally, belatedly, tuning into a channel that had been static for decades. The gallery's gasp was a collective sound, a wave of shock and disgust. Someone said, "Oh my God," loud enough to hear. When the video ended, the silence was profound, charged with a new understanding. This wasn't just a mean sister. This was a production, a lie manufactured and sold. Susan let the silence speak. Then she said, "Ms. Grant, the emails refer repeatedly to your grandmother, Marjorie Grant, and her estate. What was their stated goal regarding your grandmother?" My voice was clear now, fueled by a righteous fire. The goal, as laid out in their emails, was to make me appear unstable and unworthy in my grandmother's eyes, so that she would leave her entire estate to my mother, with the understanding it would eventually go to Laura. They were erasing me from the inheritance and from the family story. And did your grandmother believe these lies? I thought she did. For years, I believed she'd given up on me too. I looked at the journal now on the evidence table. But I was wrong. Your Honor, Susan said, her tone becoming almost reverent. I submit Defense Exhibit C, the personal journal of Marjorie Grant, along with a letter of provenance from its keeper, Dorothy Clark. She held up the journal, its floral cover familiar from my childhood visits. This journal, Susan continued, details Marjorie Grant's growing suspicion of her daughter and granddaughter's actions, her documentation of their lies, and her unwavering belief in her granddaughter, Kimberly. It was her dying wish that this truth be kept safe until the right moment to deliver it. She didn't need to read from it. Its mere presence in the courtroom, the physical proof of my grandmother's silent vigil, was the final crushing weight. Laura broke. She shoved back her chair, the sound screeching in the quiet. This is a setup. Her voice was a shrill knife, slicing through the solemnity. That journal is a fake. That old woman and her crazy friend made it up. They're all conspiring against me. Against us. She was pointing wildly at me, at Rebecca, at the journal. Ms. Weston, control yourself. Judge Vance's voice was a whip crack. But Laura was beyond control. The expensive confidence was gone, stripped away to reveal the furious, cornered child underneath. She's always been jealous. She's nothing. A nobody. And now she comes in here with her forged emails and her lies. Sit down, Laura. Patricia's hissed command was the first thing she'd said all day, but it was too late. The performance was over. The truth was out. Judge Vance slammed her gavel. Bailiff. Order. One more outburst and I will have you removed, Ms. Weston. She turned a piercing gaze to Laura's lawyer. Mr. Dalton, counsel your client. Now. As Laura sank back into her chair, trembling with rage and humiliation, Susan Gray spoke her final quiet words. Your Honor, the defense rests. The truth was not defamatory. It was just the truth. The judge called for a short recess. As I stepped down from the stand, my legs feeling both weak and incredibly strong, I didn't look at my family. I walked past their table, past the spectacle of their ruin, and stood by the window. The drizzle had stopped. A weak silver light was breaking through the clouds. I had done it. I had spoken. The shard of glass I'd carried for 19 years was no longer inside me. It was here in this room, reflected in the shattered faces of the people who had put it there. And for the first time since I was 17, I took a deep, full, unimpeded breath. The fight for air was finally over. The recess was a pocket of surreal calm in the storm. I stood by the window, the cold glass a tangible anchor to the present. Behind me, the courtroom hummed with the low, urgent buzz of people who had just witnessed something they wouldn't forget. I could hear the strained, hissed whispers from my family's corner, Mr. Dalton's tense conference with a pale and shaking Laura, the rustle of Patricia smoothing her dress with trembling hands, a futile attempt to restore order to a universe that had just come undone. Elaine came and stood beside me, not speaking, just offering the solid, silent presence of a friend who had helped me arm myself with facts instead of fists. Rebecca Clark's lawyer, Susan Gray, gave me a small, firm nod from her table. It was a look that said, it's done. The truth is in the record. When the bailiff called us back to order and Judge Vance retook the bench, the atmosphere had shifted irrevocably. The energy was no longer about whether a defamation had occurred, but about the scale of the lie that had been exposed. Laura sat shrunk in her chair, her designer dress now looking like a costume she'd been caught wearing. Patricia's poise was a fragile shell, a thin layer of ice over a deep, cold lake of exposure. She stared straight ahead, refusing to look at anyone, her profile a cutout of aristocratic denial. Mr. Dalton stood for his rebuttal, but the fire was gone. His arguments sounded procedural, hollow. He questioned the chain of custody of the DVD, suggested the emails could have been altered, called the journal the unverifiable sentiments of an elderly woman. But his words bounced off the wall of visceral, emotional evidence that now filled the room. He was no longer defending Laura's reputation. He was performing the last rites on a case that had already flatlined. Then Judge Vance did something I didn't expect. She looked directly at me. Ms. Grant, you have testified about a pattern of behavior intended to discredit you for financial gain. You have also mentioned your current profession. For the court's full understanding of the context, could you please state your occupation? It felt like the entire room leaned in. This was the part of my life they knew nothing about. The part one had built without them. I met the judge's gaze. I am the founder and CEO of AeroVital, a medical device company based in Portland, Oregon. And what is the nature of your company's work? We specialize in innovative respiratory support technology. Our flagship product is a compact, smart nebulizer system. We are currently in the final stages of developing a next-generation portable ventilator. I stated it plainly, no pride, no shame. Just fact. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Judge Vance's lips. It was not a smile of amusement, but of profound understanding. Thank you. She then turned to Susan Gray. Counselor, I understand there is a final exhibit pertaining to this line of inquiry? Susan stood. Yes, Your Honor. With the court's permission, I would like to submit Defense Exhibit D, a professional profile and recent business publication article regarding AeroVital's acquisition offer and its CEO's professional standing. The article, from a respected tech journal, was displayed on the screen. There was my photo, a professional headshot. The headline read, AeroVital's breath of fresh air, from personal passion to multi-million-dollar acquisition. It spoke of the company's growth, its mission, the recent significant offer on the table. It quoted industry experts calling the technology life-changing, and the leadership visionary and resilient. The contrast was so brutal it was almost poetic. In their emails, I was unstable, a liability, best ignored. In the real world, I was a successful entrepreneur building devices to help people breathe. The narrative they had constructed, the fragile, problematic daughter, shattered against the reality of my life like glass against stone. I saw Laura's head jerk up to stare at the screen. Her face went through a series of convulsions. Disbelief, fury, and finally a dawning, horrified comprehension. She hadn't just been cruel to a weak sister. She had targeted someone with a core of steel she never knew existed. Her cruelty hadn't broken me. It had, in some terrible roundabout way, forged me. Patricia finally turned her head. She looked at the screen, then at me. For a fleeting second I saw not anger or hatred, but something worse. A deep, chilling regret. Not regret for what she'd done to me, but regret for miscalculating. She had discarded an asset. She had bet on the wrong daughter. In her eyes, I saw the ledger of her life recalibrating in that instant, and the sum was not in her favor. Then the shutters came down again, leaving only a cold, empty blankness. Judge Vance called for final statements. Mr. Dalton's was brief, a plea to disregard ancient history. Susan Gray's was powerful in its simplicity. Your Honor, this case was never really about defamation. It was about silence. Laura Grant Weston and Patricia Grant built a kingdom on the silenced truth of Kimberly Grant. Rebecca Clark published a whisper of that truth. And the plaintiff, in suing to silence that whisper, has instead triggered an avalanche. The truth is not defamatory. It is, as we have seen today, liberating. We ask for a swift dismissal and for the plaintiff to bear all legal costs. Judge Vance did not retire to deliberate. She folded her hands on the bench, her eyes sweeping the room, lingering on Laura, on Patricia, and finally, resting on me with an expression of something resembling respect. This court has heard testimony and seen evidence of a most disturbing nature. She began, her voice low and carrying. What began as a straightforward defamation suit has revealed a far deeper, more insidious conflict. A long-term coordinated campaign of familial alienation and character assassination, motivated by financial gain. She looked at Laura. Ms. Weston, you brought this suit claiming your reputation was damaged. The evidence shows you were an active, willing participant in damaging the reputation of your own sister from a young age. The video evidence of your cruelty, corroborated by your own contemporaneous emails, demonstrates a character flaw that is frankly staggering. The article in question did not damage your reputation. Your own actions, now exposed, have done that. Laura seemed to shrink further into her chair, all defiance gone, replaced by a raw public shame. The judge turned to Patricia. Mrs. Grant, a parent's role is to protect, to nurture, to build up. The evidence shows you orchestrated a systematic effort to tear down one child to elevate another. You weaponized motherhood. The court finds this morally reprehensible. Patricia did not move a muscle, but a single tear traced a path through her perfectly applied foundation. It was not a tear of remorse for me, I knew. It was a tear for the loss of her carefully constructed world. The defamation case before me is without merit, Judge Vance declared. The statements made by the defendant, Rebecca Clark, have been proven substantially true. The case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, given the manner in which the plaintiff's own actions necessitated this defense, I am awarding full legal costs to the defendant, to be paid by the plaintiff, Laura Grant Weston. She then did something extraordinary. She addressed me directly again. Ms. Grant, this court cannot give you back the years lost to this deception. It cannot heal the wounds inflicted in that living room or in the silent war waged in emails. But it can acknowledge the truth. The record of this proceeding will stand as an official public repudiation of the lies told about you. You entered this courtroom as a witness. You leave it vindicated. She brought down her gavel. A single clean sound. Crack. It was over. The gallery erupted in a wave of movement and sound. Reporters scrambled. Susan Gray embraced Rebecca Clark. Elaine put a steadying hand on my back. I looked across the room at my family. My father was already shuffling toward the door, a man escaping a building he never realized was on fire. Patricia stood slowly, collecting her purse with mechanical precision, refusing to meet anyone's eye. She walked out without a backward glance, her head held high in a final empty performance of dignity. But Laura was frozen. She was staring at the now blank screen where her childhood cruelty and my adult success had been displayed for all to see. Her lawyer was speaking to her, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes were wide, unseeing, fixed on the ghost of the evidence. The judge had made her watch the truth she buried, and now she had to live in the crater it left behind. As I gathered my things, she suddenly looked up and our eyes locked across the crowded room. There was no smirk now, no cold calculation, just a hollow, bewildered wreckage. I felt no triumph, no vengeance, just a vast, quiet pity. She had traded a sister for an inheritance that was always tainted, and now she had lost both. I walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon light. The silver glow had strengthened, washing the wet streets in a clean pale gold. I breathed in deeply, the damp evergreen air, the distant salt tang of the Puget Sound. It was just air, but it felt like a gift, like a birthright I had finally claimed. Elaine drove me back to my hotel. We ordered room service and didn't talk about the hearing. We talked about the acquisition, about her latest project, about normal things. It was a kindness. That night, alone, I took out the one photo I kept of Grandma Marjorie. It was us in her garden, me at about 10, covered in dirt, holding a giant sunflower, both of us laughing. I touched her smiling face. "Thank you," I whispered to the quiet room, "for waiting for me, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." I thought of the inhaler in my hand, my desperate crawl across the carpet. I thought of the emails, the journal, the cold gaze of the law. The journey from that carpet to this quiet hotel room had been long and dark, but I had navigated it. I had used the very breath they tried to steal to give voice to my truth. The revenge wasn't in their humiliation, though that was a consequence. The real justice was in my liberation. They had tried to bury me under a story of weakness. But from that buried place, I had grown roots strong enough to crack the foundation of their lies. I had built a life of purpose on the very thing they used to try and destroy me. I wasn't the girl gasping for air anymore. I was the woman who built a company to ensure no one else had to. I was free. Thank you for listening till the very end. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments. Your words and reactions inspire me more than you can imagine.